Today I would like to talk about narcissism at the workplace, and I would like to focus on narcissistic leadership and bosses in particular. So what happens when you have a narcissistic boss? I don't know if it ever happened to you, but it certainly happened to me in the past, that I woke up in the morning and I had this horrible pit in my stomach and I just didn't want to go to work. I just wanted to look the other way. But quite often, narcissistic bosses, they know how to play with our vulnerabilities. Yeah, they know how to control us. They know to keep their employees in check. And how do they do that? Narcissistic bosses, just like any other narcissist, they have a tendency to isolate their targets. It is very typical for a narcissist to cause division, just like having a narcissistic parent and being the black and the white sheep of the family. If you're the black sheep in the company, for absolutely no reason, just for the reason that you might have a vulnerability that the narcissist found he can exploit, you might be doing all the work without ever getting the recognition that you deserve. Narcissistic bosses, they run companies with a lot of fear in the office. You can literally feel the tension when you come into the room. Quite often they also need to double check everything. They ask you to do overtime without additional compensation, because to them money is power. You have to understand that money is power for a narcissistic boss, and if you're just the employee, you are the little man. And if they lose too much money, they are losing power. I think the worst thing that I've ever observed with a narcissistic boss was blackmailing their employees. And a good advice in that regard is keep your private life private. Because if you talk about your private life and you show that you are a full-rounded human being and not just a machine behind a computer, if you show that you are a full-rounded human being who also has problems in life, maybe financial problems, maybe problems in the family, some sort of a vulnerability, rest assured, the narcissistic boss will take advantage of that. And a narcissistic boss will play on your existential fears. In the beginning, he might love bomb you and say you're a great employee, but over time you're being devalued and being cornered, blackmailed, like I said. Narcissistic bosses are the type of people who go out and say, I know the best lawyers in town. And they may even come up with stories in order to get you under their control. They may threaten to sue you for something completely ridiculous that is not even your fault. Those intimidation tactics are very common among narcissistic bosses. Once again, keep your private life private. They also apply gaslighting to keep you small and doubt your own achievements. They are often delusional because they think they are the best, completely neglecting the fact that they actually depend on their employees to do the work, and they would be nothing without them. What it all comes down to is a complete lack of empathy. And why are they so spiteful and aggressive against the people who are actually helping them to keep their business running? Because first of all, if there is a conflict, narcissists are unable to resolve conflicts in a civil manner. The same goes for any narcissistic boss. That's why they revert to blackmailing their employees, threatening them, worst case scenario, even firing them. But hey, maybe being fired is a blessing in disguise, because maybe you've been so intimidated all along that you were scared to leave. Maybe it's a blessing because finally that decision was taken out of your control. Now you have a chance for a new start. Quite often we don't look at it that way, because we've been isolated in this toxic workspace so much and intimidated so much that we believe this little world in that little office space is everything we have. We're completely losing sight of what's outside of it. One thing I personally observed about narcissistic bosses is that they're actually very afraid. Deep down they know that they depend on their employees. Just like any other narcissist in a relationship depends on their source of narcissistic supply, for instance, their partner. That's why if you quit your job at a company, the narcissistic boss gets really angry, even though that is quite often a self-fulfilling prophecy, because, look at how they were treating you. What I have personally observed in narcissistic bosses is that deep down they are very insecure. They fear being abandoned, and if you watch their body language when they start intimidating you, Yes, there are the few ones that come into your face, and by the way, that could almost constitute physical abuse, but quite often you will see them standing very far away from you when they are being aggressive and crossing their arms. Yeah, that is a sign of insecurity. They don't really mean what they say. Because they can't have a civilized conversation, they think they are pretty intimidating and have everything under control while they're actually losing control in that very moment, showing their true face. I personally had a severe case of narcissism in my very first job when I was still a teenager, to the point that I was actually afraid for a very, very long time to work in an office space again. And let me tell you, it took me a very, very long time to finally receive the validation that I needed. And there were no websites like Glassdoor at the time. Those came out maybe 15 to 20 years later. And I remember there was one review about this guy mentioning narcissism. I said, yeah, exactly. So from my personal experience with narcissists at the workplace, keep your private life private. Don't say too much about yourself, about your family, about the problems you might be facing. That's none of their business. And before you start a new job and sign any papers, do a very thorough investigation online about the company that you are getting involved in.